The mass is a docile herd that cannot live without a master. Wow, that's a pretty chilling thought from the 19th century sociologist Gustave Le Bon. And you know what? It cuts right to the heart of a question that still fascinates and, frankly, disturbs us today. Hello to all viewers of my channel. That idea, from over a century ago, it really raises a question that feels more relevant than ever. Why do perfectly rational, independent people sometimes do the most irrational things the second they become part of a group? Why does the I so often just get lost in the we? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dive deep into the psychology of the crowd to find out.
All right, so here's our roadmap. First up, we'll explore how our sense of self can kind of just vanish in a crowd. Then, we'll look at that magnetic pull of conformity. After that, we'll examine the darker side of things with the bystander effect. But then, we'll balance it out with the hidden benefits of belonging. And finally, we'll tackle that big question. How do we find our place between being an individual and being part of the collective?
So, let's kick things off with our guy Gustave Le Bon. Over a century ago, this French social psychologist looked at the world around him and basically declared the dawn of a new age, the era of the crowd. And what's really wild is that his observations about mobs and mass movements back then sound eerily familiar to anyone who's seen the power of an online crowd today. Now, Le Bon's definition of a crowd is super important here. See, he wasn't just talking about a bunch of people standing on a street corner. A psychological crowd is something else entirely. It's like a living, breathing entity. It forms when a shared idea or emotion takes over. And in that moment, something really strange happens. All the unique qualities of each person just dissolve, and they're replaced by a single, unified group mind.
So what actually happens to us inside that group mind? Well, according to Le Bon, our conscious personality pretty much just vanishes. Suddenly, we feel this surge of invincible power that comes from being one of many. Our sense of personal responsibility? It evaporates because, hey, we're anonymous now. Our behavior becomes way more emotional, more primitive, and far, far more open to the influence of a charismatic leader. We become, in his words, an automaton.
Okay, so if that's what happens, the next logical question has to be how, right? How does this dramatic transformation even happen? Well, the main mechanism is a force that I promise you we've all felt in our lives: conformity.
But you know, conformity isn't just a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. It really has two very different faces. On one hand, you've got compliance. This is when you go along with the group on the outside, maybe to avoid a fight or just to fit in. But deep down, you haven't changed your mind at all. But then there's approval, and this is a much deeper form, where the group's influence actually convinces you, genuinely changing what you believe to match their point of view.
So why is this pull so incredibly strong? Well, the reasons are deeply, deeply human. Sometimes it's all about ego. We conform because we think it'll get us ahead, maybe earn us some status or reward. Other times it's altruistic. We value the group's harmony so much that we're willing to put our own opinions aside for the good of the team. And sometimes, it's just about information. When you're in a situation and you don't know what to do, you naturally look at what everyone else is doing and think, well, they must know something I don't. This urge to look to others for clues can be helpful for sure, but it can also have absolutely terrifying consequences. What happens when everyone in a group is looking at everyone else and nobody does anything at all? This, my friends, is where unity can turn really, really dangerous. Before we go on, just ask yourself this question and be honest. If you saw an emergency happening right in front of you, a real crisis, would you be the one to step in and help? I think most of us would like to say yes, of course. But the research, well, it tells a different, much more complicated story.
This is what's known as the bystander effect. It was first studied after a truly shocking case back in 1964, where a young woman was murdered, while reportedly 38 of her neighbors saw it happening from their windows over a 30-minute period, and yet no one intervened in time. It's just a chilling example of how the presence of other people can paradoxically lead to mass inaction.
There are two powerful psychological forces at play here. First, there's the diffusion of responsibility. Basically, the more people there are, the less pressure any single person feels to actually do something. We all just assume someone else will call for help, right? Second, you've got pluralistic ignorance. We look at the faces in the crowd for clues. If nobody else seems worried, we tell ourselves, oh, it must not be a big deal, even if our gut is screaming that something is seriously wrong. Everyone is just waiting for someone else to act first.
Now, it's so easy to hear all of this and just conclude that groups are bad, that they strip us of our individuality and our morals. But that's only half the story. To be human is to be part of a group, and there are some profound reasons for that. In fact, You could say our very survival depends on it.
I mean, think about it. Groups are the bedrock of society. They're where we first learned the rules of the world. They are how we achieve incredible things, from building skyscrapers to creating vaccines, tasks that no single person could ever do alone. And on a really personal level, they give us essential support, they help us figure out who we are, and they satisfy that deep, fundamental need we all have to just belong.
And this really brings us to the core tension of this whole topic. Conformity is truly a double-edged sword. On one side, it's the glue that holds our societies together, allowing us to adapt, cooperate, and pass down our culture. But on the other side, it can totally stifle creativity, make us vulnerable to manipulation, and lead us to just uncritically accept things we might otherwise question.
So this brings us to the final and maybe the most crucial question. In a world that's constantly pulling us in both directions, how do we find the right balance between our identity as an individual and our need to be part of something bigger than ourselves? This tension is often framed as a battle between two major worldviews. You've got individualism, which champions the self. It's all about personal freedom, independence, and the idea that the rights of the individual come first. Then you have collectivism, which champions the group. It emphasizes our interdependence and social harmony, and here the needs and goals of the whole group are what's most important. The truth is, most of us, and most cultures, are living somewhere on a spectrum between these two poles.
So, I'll leave you with this to think about. In our modern, hyper-connected world of social media tribes and online movements, the pressure to conform is probably stronger than it's ever been. How do we get all the amazing benefits of community without falling into the trap of mindless conformity? Where do you draw that line for yourself? Subscribe to the channel and like, and also suggest your topics for future videos in the comments.